Anime is a vast and varied medium, and if you're not already familiar, it can be daunting to find something you might be interested in watching. This is a podcast where three average anime enjoyers introduce their uninitiated co-host to their favorite anime touchstones, so he can join them deep in the Weebs.
Hey everyone, Bob here. Uh, Changing things up for this special episode. Just so you know, Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines a book report as a detailed account or statement about a book, and anime is a Japanese style of animation that is characterized by colorful graphics, action-filled plots, and futuristic themes. On today's special episode, I have tasked my fellow podcasters with watching full series of different shows I chose to watch myself. Dare they try my elementary taste? Let's find out. The shows I chose for them are Ungo, Death Parade, and BNA, Brand New Animal. So everyone, did you have a good time with these?
Well, that's going to have to wait till we get to our report.
I know we're already recording, but I don't want to burn pod.
Speaking of, Nick, you're first. I kind of chose these series based on the fact that they were short. As we were going through our entire first season, I kind of wanted to test the waters a little bit, so I strictly Googled short anime series. Each of these are about 10 to 11 episodes. Nothing too long, so I could get through them. It kind of worked out that we came up with the idea of having me select shows for you guys, and I never told you about them. So I'm just wondering what you think. I can't say right now till we get to the end what my opinions were of these overall, but I'm curious to see what you thought as well.
Okay, so you did also watch these shows.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you watch them before you doled them out, or did you watch them with us?
Before I doled them out. Yours, in fact, was the first show I watched. It was a while ago.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, for my summer vacation, I watched Ungo. All right. I have written a statement.
Oh, good.
Ungo. This show is as though I was some sort of Meiji era nerd, and I said to myself, I want to write period detective stories, so I'm going to take on the pen name David, and I'll call this collection of short stories David's Detective Stories. And then later, some other people came along and go, hey, those were great. Let's do a modern AU interpretation set in a universe where 9/11 was a worldwide phenomenon, and we'll call it Duvid. Anyway, Ungo is a show based off of Ongo Meiji era detective stories, and I'm really interested in what that novel is like. I did not look into it partly because I'm having trouble finding it. Okay, but about the show.
Yes.
This show is set in an alternate modern Japan where the events of 9/11, because they all but say the words 9/11, even though they do say, terrorist attacks in 2001 that in America. And I'm like, okay, so just stop being cowards about it. But basically, those became a worldwide phenomenon that reached Japan and were of such severity that the World War II. What was it? It was an amendment to the Japanese Constitution. Is that what they have? The part that says, "Hey, we have the JSDF, the Self-Defense Force, but it's not an army for going to war." They were like, actually, what if this were going to war now? And there's a war that leads to large-scale destruction of Tokyo, and then the formation of a draconian information control policy. So it is very much like, hey, the government can ban information and shut people down, and it's very it is a very locked down version of modern Japan. The chairman of JJ Systems, who I have already forgotten the name of, but I'm going to call him Captain JJ. He has been given control over a surveillance system that would make Lucian Fox, played by Morgan Freeman, say, "Hey, we should not have this." He has been given control of this that allows him to solve crimes all over Tokyo and Japan without leaving his own home. Everybody's cell phone he gets to look through, and he's using that to solve crimes. One day, his daughter Rie comes into contact with Yuki something or other, an old school in-person style detective who is driven to reveal the truth of situations. While watching him work, Rie begins to realize that the reported resolutions to her father's cases might not actually be representative of the reality of the situations, and she finds herself torn between her senses of justice and trust. Also, Yuki's sidekick, Inga, is a literal big demon lady who can make anyone answer a single question truthfully by eating their soul. It doesn't stop there, because in the process of dispelling the usual truth occlusion that comes with mysteries, they encounter a god figure with the power to bend reality to the word of their partner. So, it's not only is it this, political dystopia, but also literal supernatural stuff that's happening all the time. Any questions so far? I realized, I don't know if this was going to be reading out and then question, or if we wanted to do usual interjections.
I will interject with the detective who we follow. His name is Shinjitsu.
Okay, right. We have
I'm sorry, Shinjiro. Shinjitsu is the president. And
Jinjutsu, yeah.
Yeah. And Rinroku is the guy behind the cell phone.
Kaisho Rinroku, yes.
Never present guy.
Oh, can we talk about, I watched this in the dub, which the dub with subtitles on in a way that suggests to me neither is good. I'll get to that later. But so much of where I was watching this, so much of the information about characters, like names and titles, were written on screen and then never translated into English. So it took me a number of episodes to realize chairman of what whenever they kept referring to Kaisho as the chairman. The answer is of JJ Systems. That's why I call him Captain JJ.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so here's the thing. I'm actually really into all of the characters in this show. They are fantastic playing pieces for the stories they want to tell. They've got interesting motivations, they're interestingly positioned, they create a really sort of thematically and motivationally interesting network of characters to each other. And they are really aligned in ways where themes are very set up for conflict within the show. Like, this very well could be a show that is about way more than what happens on screen. A show that is more than the plot beats, more than literal narrative. And I didn't even get around to mentioning my favorite character, who is the last remaining artificial intelligence who would be destroyed if discovered by the authorities, because prudish puritanical laws against AI sex bot death matches led to AIs being outlawed altogether. This character is Kamikaze Midori. That's not it. This AI character, it ends up being, while a lot of people are sort of thematically aligned with what is the absolute truth of reality in this situation, or what is the perceived reality in terms of, what has been shown, what are the lies that have been told, and what is sort of like the easiest narrative to deal out to people. The AI actually sits here as almost like a neutral observer, because they are being an AI, they are magnificent hackers. So they have like free and open access to information but also like no real standing on anything. They kind of end up being used as a MacGuffin for our hero detectives to have the same sort of information access that Captain JJ has. But they also still have like their own subplot about kind of determining like, oh, do I have like morals even though I'm an AI? How much is my personhood? Plus they are also like a body swapper, so they have really interesting ideas about like where their personhood resides, and you know what it means to be in a place, and they are very nonchalant about just jumping around and being in different situations. It's like all the characters are really cool. I was talking earlier about Rie, who like I'm kind I'm kind of surprised that she's not really the main character is Yuki, our detective boy, but like Rie would also be a really good main character because she is somebody who like her own morals are aligned with Yuki in being like, oh, the just thing to do is to reveal the truth. But she has been raised by Captain JJ, who we very quickly find out is about like, oh, what is the like cover up story that we're telling people in order to like keep the peace and to keep people from going crazy, and in order to sort of like maintain a status quo that is not just about maintaining power with the powerful, but also about like, you know, to some effect protecting people from outside sources. Because as far as I know, all of the terrorist attacks, you know, in the premise of the show were real and legitimate. So like there are people like living in fear, and how do you keep them feeling safe and trying to like the whole visual of the show is people trying to live normal lives as we know it, but like every single shot has like destroyed buildings in it. Every establishing shot that pans over the Tokyo skyline looks closer to the Fists of the North Star, you know, collapsed building sort of skylines. It's kind of, but also it goes kind of like unsaid in a way that I find really kind of subtle in a nice way. And this pretty much ends where I have good things to say about the show.
So I have two questions for you.
Okay.
One, I think we just got the answer to this, but did you like the show?
Um, uh, yeah, jumping ahead a little bit, like, I think this show had far more promise than what it actually, like, managed to pull off in a way that this show just left me frustrated, because there is such a good, it's, I've been trying to think of a good metaphor, but it's just like, if you look at a baker who's working with 5-star ingredients, but then they don't actually understand how to make a cake out of them, and so you just get sort of like a, you know, really shoddy cupcakes at the end. It's just like, you were set up for you were set up for greatness with all of these pieces. You had all these fantastic things going into it, and like it's this kind of goes into it, because it's just like, I don't necessarily think that the show is bad. I think the show just fails to do anything. But before I go into my longer thing about that, what was question 2?
It can wait till after your second part.
Okay. So like everything I just set up about like, oh, this, you know, these characters aligned along thematic axes about truth as perceived or as objective, all of that stuff that sounds so good and so strong isn't in that position until like the last 3 episodes. They spend a lot of time just sort of doing mystery of the week sort of episodes, but the mysteries themselves are okay, but I don't think they do a good job of adapting them to anime, because again, the mysteries of the week, the next time on's all call out like, hey, specifically next time we're retelling this story from that original you know, detective novel. And it's just like, oh, okay. So like the mystery themselves are good, but this show is not a good mystery show. Because like the 2 ways that you do mystery shows is either A, it's the sort of play along at home where we're following the detective and we're seeing all of the clues that they're seeing, and it's sort of like, oh, can you solve the mystery alongside of them and figure out what the answer is by the time you get to the end of the show. But this show isn't really doing that because we are not following the detective all the time, and even when we are, it has the sort of issue where when they're revealing the answer, they are revealing things that we were kind of never shown, or are really unnatural leaps in logic from what we were shown that he is actually using to get to the solution. So it's not a good play along at home detective show. The other way to do a detective show is to essentially be a thriller, which I think is more in the, almost like the Columbo line of it. And for anybody who listened to episode zeros, which I don't think we ever released, I am a really big fan of like the Columbo style detective show, but that is more about, okay, we sort of know what's at play, and the story for the audience is far more about the order in which information is revealed. It is about looking through the eyes of multiple different characters, which this show has plenty of characters. And it is about, sort of building tension for our characters to where, the climax is the reveal of the plot, whether or not you would have been able to get there yourself, such that everything finally cracks open and, you see how all the pieces shake out. This show doesn't do that well either. That is more what it's trying to do, but I think whether it's because this is a shorter series at only 11 episodes, or because they are trying to fit, novels into half-hour episodes with adding additional bits. Because, like I said, I haven't figured out, I haven't been able to find a good source for the original stories, so my guess is all of these supernatural elements are fully additional for this show, which I haven't even talked too much about them yet, because part of it is the Inga is just a gimmick to be like, we need one person to answer the truth, in a way that almost like if anybody watched Poker Face, that show had the sort of gimmick of, oh, the main character can tell when somebody's lying. And it's like, okay, you have this like gimmick that says, oh, okay, I can figure out specific truths, and we use those to sort of crack the mystery. This feels a bit more like that. And that's kind of, for the majority of the show, that's just what Inga does, is she just sort of comes in and is that to be like a gimmick to get us a major piece to solve the case. And other stuff that they go into, I think, is interesting in the sense of being like a fantasy world building kind of show. But again, they don't really do that till the very end. And that is crowded out by trying to do a mystery of the week. Like, the show is so crowded that every piece of it gets short shrift. So, when I say it's bad at being a thriller detective show, it's because they cannot build tension. They cannot, they do not have the time. Every piece of information, as well as a solution, it feels like it's rushed to being delivered. There's no time for tension to build. There's just like no time for anything. And when you add to that, okay, there is, also these supernatural elements that we want to work in. So now that is not only giving other stuff less time, but it itself has no time. And there's like multiple times in this show where they go to a character to be like, hey, what are the specifics on like the mechanical nature of the powers of the supernatural being, and then the other character begins to explain it, and they literally fade to black and just skip that part. And I'm like, when I'm like looking at a show where like you're doing magical world, fantasy world building, that's the stuff. Like, there were parts when the show reminded me of Death Note, which was a show that I did not really like. Not to speak of the manga, I have greater not opportunity, not premise. It's not appreciation because I never actually read it, but like I have higher hopes that the manga is better than the show was for Death Note. This show made me think well of the Death Note show on that terms, because like Death Note is exactly that. It is a show that is like, you know what the crime is, even though it is, you know, ostensibly a detective trying to solve these mysteries, but it is also entirely about, you know, testing the systemic nature of superpowers. This show is set up for that, does none of it, literally fades out when they're about to do it. There's just so many pieces that, like, it could be doing so many of these things. Every time it's about to, it moves on to something else. You know, when I say thriller, the thriller style is about jumping between perspectives, because it is more important about the order in which information is delivered to the audience rather than what is discovered by the detective. This is closer to that, but stuff is either, you know, introduced, but we didn't quite know what we were being shown, or we don't get to, you know, the downtime to make those connections. Nothing is lingered on. It's just like beat credits. There are a couple of times where it feels like the credits are rolling, and it's just like, oh, I did not realize we hit the solution of that. And then also like the thematic part of the show too. You know, I keep saying like, oh, what is so compelling about these characters is that not only are they, you know, characters on their own, but they represent these major, you know, thematic access that is ripe for conflict. There are points of this show where Kaisho and Yuki literally have like the standing across from each other sort of, you know, standoff where they are proclaiming their philosophies at each other. But it's never actually a conflict. Nothing ever changes. Nothing ever, you know, resolves, or it's not a conflict. They just say what their stances are, and then we move on. It is set up like a conflict. It is set up like this is a climactic showdown. It's not. And then we go on, and it's another mystery of the week, or it's another... the one that really... that's I'm skipping ahead of my own thought. This is about where my prepared statement goes down to just what my skeleton thoughts were, so it starts to fall apart. It's just like there are so many. There's like 3 different great shows that this show was posed to be, but it couldn't decide which one to be, and it kind of failed to be any of them. So, like, the more I watched it, the more I was like, oh, there's a lot of good parts in here, followed by, oh, there are so many good things that the show could have been that it is simply not. Like, it is when I watched the first like episode or two, I was just like, all right, this is kind of nothing. And then at the end, I was like, this could have been so much, and instead it is nothing. And it got weirdly so much a stronger feeling at the end of it. Like even kind of going back, and this is essentially what I'll end with, is like, I was just trying to make a list of what was memorable about this show. Inga becomes a big lady to do her gimmick. Like, normally, you know, she is a young boy character to be quote unquote in hiding, but then when it's time to do her soul eating trick, she like steps into a phone booth essentially and comes out as this gigantic sexy lady version of the Target dog, because she's got the spot over her one eye, and also she's purple. I didn't think it was purple, but somebody in the show said purple. And she asks him, like, takes the face and goes, tell me the truth, and sucks her soul out, and then the person says the real thing. Like, there's that. When I said this show is, you know, in all but explicitly said, sort of like in a immediately post 9/11 but more severe world, there is a flashback scene to a terrorist attack, which is one of the ones that like led to the start of the war. And I was really shocked because, as somebody who remembers watching the footage of, you know, 9/11 on the day, it was kind of really evocative of that in a way that was like, on one hand impressive, on the other hand really unsettling, because that is such a, and we are so far removed from that. That's over 20 years ago at this point. Don't think too hard about it. But like, just like as a generational shift, the amount of people for whom that won't hit such a sore spot is growing. But for somebody who it was, I was just like, oh, that is a very real, very sensitive and dark point that you are very intentionally prodding at, and then you're going to make a show that doesn't even give it like the proper time to make that your thing. That is sort of insulting, might be a bit rough of a way to say it, but like it was memorable. I would not say for good reasons though. Memorable. Another memorable is going back to the idea of this show doesn't know how to build tension. There is a whole episode which starts on the premise of everything we're about to see is illusory, is sort of a hallucination, is a dream sequence. It still ends up being a mystery, and the mystery itself is like, it ruins itself at the start, because it's just like, okay, well, it is hallucinatory, it is an illusion, so nothing says that it is going to follow a real sort of physics that means inconsistencies have to be true. In an illusion, inconsistencies simply can be. But also because, the main character is involved in it, it's just like, okay, so any threat that they're in instantly takes all of the tension out of that, because it's like, okay, well, it's all an illusion. To what extent, we don't know, but we know it's all an illusion. So that is an entire episode spent showing us stuff and treating it like, oh, what's going to happen next? And I'm like, who cares? It's an illusion. It's not till the next episode, when it turns out it's a two-parter, that they were like, okay, this was the illusion, here's what's actually happening, where that whole arc actually became like, oh, okay, and then these were connected, and this was interesting. It's just like, at that point, that's sort of the part that makes it, actually, I think a decent two-parter. I looking back, I kind of like where that went, but I spent that whole first episode just going, why are we here? That's another thing that's like memorable, but not a good reason to be memorable. All right, here is the most memorable thing for me. There is a scene where a cop handcuffs a refrigerator. What the hell? So I love it. That is so goofy. That is so over the top. That it is memorable for the goofiness that it is. It came out of nowhere. This show is also like, this show has a couple of moments of that where it's just like, oh, we're going to do something super goofy. For example, that illegal last remaining AI friend of theirs, there is a scene where they are in like a children's teddy bear, because that's how they escaped from getting handcuffed while they were a fridge. Don't ask, because they were a suspect in a murder. Listen, there's a lot going on here. But they're in this like kid's toy, and they're telling a story about like, yeah, I'm illegal because, the Puritans said we don't want sex robot death matches, even though, whatever. It's not like we're real people. Even I get that, and I'm one of them, which also could be a weird argument that we could go into. Show does not care for it. I don't care to go into it right now. But then it's just like, oh, hey, we are good at being sex bots. If you let me just hang out, I'll pleasure you. And then we learn that this kid's toy was built with a tongue, because they begin to try and use it on Yuki to like convince him, like, I know how to pleasure a detective boy. And it's just like, A, no, stop it. 2, who built that with a tongue? Like, there's so many of these moments of just like, there is like a goofiness, there's like an over the top surreal comedy to it that is so infrequent that they are some of my favorite parts, and they are like some of the least coherent to everything else going on. And I say this, I handcuffing this fridge, I said it's the most memorable. This is also a show where the resolution to one episode is we find out that a girl killed her mother and later found out that it was for no reason whatsoever. And the episode basically ends on her having a mental breakdown. That is less memorable when this guy handcuffed this fridge. Also, those are the same show. Like, it is so moment to moment, you just feel this show like being torn in different directions and never settling on any one thing to be. And there's not enough of the demon stuff. But I say there's not enough of the demon stuff. We get a demon on demon fight at the end of the show. That's like the climax of the series. That was cool. That happens in one episode and it's over pretty quick. Like there's so much cool stuff and there's not enough of any of it. Very last thing I'll say. This is my PS. Very last thought. This series had a prequel movie called Chapter Inga. It is a prequel. It is sort of the origin story of why Yuki has this demon lady sidekick. That is the best part of this whole show, is that prequel movie, because it understands, okay, we are more like a thriller. We are about the narrative of it rather than any of the specific mysteries of it. They do get into the world building of, why are there demons? How do their powers work? They do use that as the sort of like, oh, all the pieces. Can you figure out how we're about to use it to make this climactic moment go down? It is like in every way better than the entire full series. I even think that it would work better as an entry point to the series because it is so much better and introduces ideas so much better. But in a way, the biggest downfall of that is I feel like if you started by watching this, I think it would give you too much promise and then the rest of the show would let you down immediately. But at least then you're let down immediately and not frustrated like me, who was only mattered the deeper I got into it. But yeah, go watch that prequel movie. It's really good. The end.
And question number 2.
Okay.
Would you advise Joe and Chuck to watch this?
Watch that prequel movie. Straight up, watch that prequel movie. That is extremely good. Like, I know I'm very... And I know that there have been a lot of things in show where it's just like, this one thing that they kind of failed to do put me off of the whole thing. I can't tell you what the good part of this show is. I can tell you, like, there's so much about, like, Demon Lady Mystery. I know that those are the kind of shows that Joe likes. Sort of like there is this sort of, longer burn thematic conflict. I know that that's, something I bet that Chuck could get into. So it's just like, I would love to recommend this show to a lot of people. I don't think it's for anybody because none of the cool parts in it they pull off. Like, I think anybody who likes anything that I would pitch people on, I think would just let them down because none of it is developed and executed well enough. But that prequel movie, it picks a couple of those and doubles down and does them well. Like, I started to look in and like who worked on this show, and it's like the writer and director, they between them they've worked on stuff like Full Metal Alchemist and one of those movies, and a bunch of other stuff that I remember, seeing and people have spoken well of. But like once you hear Full Metal Alchemist, it's just like, oh yeah, people love that. How did we get here? But yeah, that movie's really good. Like, if you like that enough to go into the rest of the show knowing, hey, the rest of the show is kind of a bummer, is kind of a letdown, like, okay, as long as you know that going in. But like, I think everyone here would really enjoy that prequel movie because I think that is legit just pretty good.
Okay. So we've gotten through Nick's book report here. Go.
Any questions?
Yes, any questions? Yes?
No, because I will be honest, every criticism he has is one I've had about other shows and I've seen in the past where it's like, here's all these great ideas, and we fail to execute on every one of them.
Mm-hmm. And
so that has switched me off. Like, maybe I'll check out that prequel movie, but it has switched me off from the show.
Like,
go ahead.
check out the prequel movie. I think that works really good. If you like that, the last 3 episodes of the series are sort of a 3-parter, and that's when it is very much the best it is going to do at any of the things it tries to do. After that, like, but then you wrap around back to the first of the series, and then it's like, okay, this is more, mystery of the week stuff, and it's just like it is all sort of diminishing returns, but like the pieces are so good. And it's rare for me to like something based on the premise over the execution. I'm usually somebody who's just like, it's like, oh, well, it doesn't matter what it was, did they do it well? Here I'm just like, I want to love this, but that's where it is. So
and that's what scares me about a show like that, because I've experienced many a show like that, and in the end it's just come down to, well, that sure was a thing.
yeah.
Do you think that show would benefit from a season 2?
Or a reboot.
I think this show, yeah, I would rather sort of see a reboot. So, okay. In my anime club amongst my friends, we have watched a number of Detective Conan movies, because Detective Conan is a manga and an ongoing television series, but even more, like, every once in a while they'll release a movie. It's like a holiday special or whatever. I think what this show would be better served by is being a little more like that. Like, if you wanted to have a TV series that was, mystery of the week plus, over time we talk about the conflict between the themes of truth of the situation versus what is the best story to be told to the public, what is the best story to be remembered by history. I think that would be a great ongoing show. But I also think trying to condense everything into when this show does 2 and 3 parters, which it has like 2 2-parters and 1 3-parter, and if you're doing the math, that's 7 of 11 episodes. Which you would think like, oh, so that's most of it. Doesn't feel like most of it. The 2-parters are not 2-parter enough. They really feel so, like I said, with the hallucination 2-parter, it's like the first episode feels like it's wasted. That could have been like the first 5 minutes of a single episode. But like giving all of these mysteries more time to breathe, more time to focus on the other bits than just a mystery, or, having more time for the world building to occur. I think giving each, if this show is twice as long and each episode just got more time to breathe, I think that would do so much for it. And even just more time to like figure out what are these things about. Like I said, every piece needs more time to breathe and be developed. So I think a reboot where it's either we make it twice as long or we break it down and it's like, no, this is like a series of movies, each, working on a longer time to deal with a given mystery. Plus then as a whole, they have more time to develop the meta narrative over time. Like that would be fantastic.
Gotcha.
Joe, any
other
thoughts on this
questions?
Not really. I have suggestions of similar shows to watch for similar, better themes, but those might come up in future seasons. So
okay, see, that's the thing, because the Inga, when she's in her non-big demon lady form, which why is she ever in that form? That seems like a waste. Okay, but small Inga is absolutely gremlin coded in like every way. It like she has I guess it's weird. Has one of those like panda hoodies that's also a scarf, but also you can tuck your hands into the pockets on the end of the scarf. So it's like it's like, the poor man's Kigurumi or whatever. Like everything about this kid is just sneaking around, being sort of a goofus and being like, can I eat their soul now? And it's just like, I so want you to, kid. This show makes me think, oh, so and so would like this part of it, and then I'm like, yeah, but they don't do anything with that part. Ugh. All right, that's I'm repeating myself now. That's Ungo, everyone.
I thank you. You can take your seat again.
Okay,
Uh,
I'm gonna go lay down. I got the vapors now.
Alright. So I believe we will be moving on. The next person we have here is Chuck, and you have been assigned BNA, Brand New Animal.
Hold on. For my book report, I watched all 12 episodes of the 2020 series BNA Brand New Animal. It was certainly a show by Trigger. In BNA, a bunch of, and I'm going to preface this now, this is a bit, deal with it. Therianthropes have a big talk about being different, then they eat lunch, and then they have a dialogue about acceptance, bigotry, equal rights, and boy, how swell it would be to not be who we are until they magically realize self-acceptance and being different is okay. Just like in X-Men The Last Stand. And that's pretty much it. I give it a B-. That being said,
Oh, this is the one I watched Nick watch. Like, I passed by while Nick was watching some of this, and the most that I noticed was the hot dog boy.
and that's kind of what they want you to look at. So here's the thing. BNA, I will give it. I'm going to give it some credit. We're gonna do the sandwich. Here we go. So BNA does have a lot of hooks that specifically would get my attention. You got themes of equal rights, fighting for them, battling bigotry, establishing a place where you can fit in and your found family, and finding acceptance in the world while finding a way to deal with, typically peacefully, but because this is an anime, especially by Trigger, not so peacefully. And I'm big on those. Anyone who knows my personal background will know I'm big on those. We don't have to go into that here, but I am. Those are big things and important to me. So I really like that. We're getting something, because traditionally in anime, I don't feel like we get this. We get the, oh, I'm ostracized just because I'm kind of slightly different, but not really. This is different. You have, the premise here is that there is a genetic marker that has existed for all time in humans, where certain humans turn into beastmen. The first clue besides the animation itself, first clue I knew this was Trigger. It's like, there's that word. We're going to have that word come up. And we have our young protagonist, Michiru. She has recently only just become a beastman as a teenager, but has been a human her whole life. This is a thing that is abnormal. Beastman status is a thing from day one. It's even on your driver's license what species you are. That's not problematic in its own ways. And so she's trying to escape to Anima City, the special district for beastmen. Again, it's a nice idea. Boy, is there some problems with that idea too, though. And in the first episode, give them a lot of credit. We already have people, your racist, fascist, humans only purity gang tries to get her. She's saved by a weasel. I'm sorry, that's a Marie. She's a mink. It comes up a lot. And she manages to help, quote unquote, Michiru not only escape, but get across this river, lake, body of water to Anima City. And in doing so, she's kind of left on her own, gets lost in a crowd during a celebration, because I guess everyone gets the memo ahead of time that someone new is coming in, even if they're being smuggled in. And it's kind of creepy at first, but I guess this is their thing. Cool. I'm not here to judge a culture. And during this, she sees this big bluish white, supposed to be silver, wolf on the top of a building. That's unusual, because beastmen only take humanoid beast form, regardless of the species of animal. And when we say animal, it is lowercase generalization, anything not a human that you would find in, say, a zoo or an aquarium or an aviary. That said, and then she also happens to bump into, as Joe so succinctly put it, hot dog boy. who also happens to be this blue, white, supposed to be silver color. I'm sure it's nothing. Don't put a lot of thought into it. And things ensue. A terrorist attack happens from a traitor beastman. Dog boy, his name is Shiro. Hold on. I'm sorry. I must have deleted his last name. Ogami. There it is. Shiro Ogami. And we're going to come back to that first name in a minute. Saves the day, finds the traitor, beats him to a pulp. That all being said, it has a nice, interesting premise. And then as soon as we leave episode 1, we are officially in a trigger show where everything is really just telegraphed way too early and way too obviously. Even the first episode we have this. Now, there are some interesting parts. We are dealing with a world that is on par for modern day technology, maybe slightly a little advanced because of a few things that pop up here and there. And I think that's really cool. I can appreciate that kind of setting because I love the X-Men, and I love how the X-Men have translated into a modern era. So this really pulls at that for me initially. But like I said, a lot is telegraphed way too early. Now we're in the middle of the sandwich. There's a lot of just obvious, you're the bad guy. You're supposed to be someone that we believe in, but because you're drawn X way, we already know you're not on the level. Your visual design gives away way too much. And then I'll be honest, if you've seen Kill la Kill, you kind of already have the numbers pegged here. If you've seen Gurren Lagann, you've already got the numbers pegged here. And that's fine if you like that. A lot of people do. I prefer a little bit more than a children's swimming pool worth of depth. A lot of things here are very superficial. If there is a Chekhov's childhood friend that was mysteriously disappeared / kidnapped, that Chekhov's childhood friend will show up absolutely later. That's clearly not something that actually happens, just because I happen to bring that example up. The identity of the Silver Wolf is very, very ambiguous to everyone in this world, but it is completely and blatantly obvious to this main character and us. And it really has a lot of opportunity in this show to say something, commit to the bit, do something you don't see in a lot of anime, which is tackling big issues. And it gives that up for, the baseball episode and the water filtration episode, where we just do it because we are poor, destitute people, so therefore we're going to scam other people out of their money. Not a good look, show. And then we come to the animation / someone's copying other people's homework. There is a big fight between your super big bad, because it's Trigger, and your hero. And I'm not gonna lie, this absolutely, when I say Shiro, we got to come back to this. The final fight in this show, because spoiler, there is one. We get essentially the same, more or less, fight of, well, I am the original and you are derivative of me, that occurred exactly in Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works, and was done better there when Gilgamesh fought Shiro. And then the visual cue also, essentially, we get the scene from 2014's Godzilla of, I'm gonna breathe the fire down your mouth and kill you now, against an enemy that has 3 heads and gold, just like Ghidorah fighting Godzilla. And through all of this, and there's some real interesting issues when it comes to, like, the villain and the plot reveal, the obvious plot reveal, that they start to say, like, hey, there's some real problematic elements of, like, we let racism, bigotry, self-interest in surviving versus cooperation, fostering community amongst our demographic, all that gets swept under the rug for the super mega happy ending. That being said, we're going to come up to the other side of the sandwich now. This show, in my research, won an award. Specifically, it was the Ursa Major Award, which is given out by the furry community to a show that does outstanding work depicting furries or furry adjacent media in a very positive light. And I will give that this year. While it is not a literal one-to-one, the metaphor is clearly there. And that's something that anime really doesn't tackle often, again, because of the themes that the show is trying to deal with. And it did it much better than a lot of other shows would have, to its credit. Not to where I wanted it to be, but better than what I expected it to be, especially from Trigger. And I got to give it credit, and I'm glad this exists. Is this necessarily my particular cup of tea by the end of it? No, because I would like more substance than it was willing to give. And that's fine. That's its choice. That was the directors, the writers. And when I looked into the writers and directors have essentially only done Gainax/Trigger work, it shows. I personally, for me, find this like as a mid-tier series. I think, though, for others, I think Joe and Nick would probably like this. Just using the Gurren Lagann comparison and the frenetic animation and character designs very much feel very Trigger, very Gainax. Those don't always land with me, and that's a me thing. But I'll go back and I'll say this. I'm glad the series exists and that there is a group of people that like the series. Everyone should have something. I have friends that are part of the furry community that are very important to me. And knowing that they have something to say, hey, look, we have something positive to look at that doesn't make us out to be perverts or radical in any way or the other in a negative light makes me happy. So overall, a serious opinion of this, like I said, it's a mid-tier for me. For others, it's going to strike a higher chord. But it's certainly not, it's far and away not the worst thing I've ever watched.
Do you think that the show would be served having a second season?
You know, I was thinking about that because I remember hearing way back when this first came out and shortly thereafter, people thinking it was going to get or was trying to set up a second season. And honestly, I don't think it would because, again, we're talking about Trigger and Gainax. They typically don't, from what I have seen, do second seasons. I don't think they would know how to do a second season. Especially for something like this that is attempting to tackle bigger issues. I think it's better as is with its super mega happy ending because I'll be honest, if they kept the same team, I think they would it would be worse off for it.
Gotcha. Nick, Joe, any questions?
Okay. Anima City reporter over here. I have a couple questions.
I'll acknowledge the reporter from the Anima City Tribune.
One, how did you feel about the totally not magical legendary entity White Wolf's name basically being White Wolf?
You remember how I said things were communicated incredibly early?
Uh-huh.
And my feelings on that statement stands.
Okay.
Next question.
Number 2, did this show help you determine what your persona is?
I do not have one. Next question.
Okay. Were you like very sort of not offended, but certainly confused how a show that sets a Tanuki as its main character with superpowers never really addresses any sort of scrotum-based superpowers?
The thought occurred to me, and it was probably one of the reasons I was really glad it was a girl instead of a guy, as the lead character. My bigger problem was like, oh, she just has all these superpowers, and even though we get an explanation kind of how she became the way she is, boy, does it just drop the ball in explaining any the hell of the rest of it
Mm-hmm.
at all. and again, these are things that set me off. It's like, okay, if you're gonna pull the no pun intended here, but trigger on
Nah.
giving, because I'll give them credit too, they kind of start off with some really good world building. And then it just all kind of falls flat. It's like, okay, we did the first episode. Hey, all right, everyone just take 5 for the rest of the season. I figured that her tail blowing up was supposed to be the equivalent, because if they actually made it her ass, that would be just too much.
Yeah, it'd be a bit much. Did you... I'm assuming maybe you didn't go too much into this because of spoiler reasons, but
Mhm.
did you feel that the idea of like, hey, secret unpopulous genetic testing to create synthetic beastmen, was there any meat to that plot arc?
So I see the line of where they were going with that through the spoiler of why, but testing, essentially the how we got to this being a thing really felt so lazy. This is like, how could this happen? Um, to try and not give anything, like a box fell off the back of the truck and now it's radioactive goop got in some blood. That's not what happened. But it's not terribly far off either.
Mm.
And now we have 2 Spider-Mans. No, it felt very lazy. It, like, I would have been more satisfactory if this had just been an intentional thing that happened. It's like, we are trying to understand X, so we need to test Y, so we have a control group. That, 5 seconds of thought, and I came up with that watching it on the spot when they gave the reveal. I'm like, I'll be honest, I was watching this and I just put my drink down and I said, that's how that happened? Fuck off.
Okay, yeah. I totally see where you're coming from with the idea of this show is a lot of nothing, but it is a, Studio Trigger nothing, so it's got a lot of flash. That white wolf, definitely not a legendary mythical creature, primordial king of all the beastmen, Wolf Boy, is really hot. And if I was going to have a persona, I'm going to say that's very informative. But yeah,
so to your point, I'm gonna cut you off there. I'm gonna interject real quick. So that's probably one of my biggest problems with shows like this. We don't have to worry about even like a C-level amount of effort. We've got a character that people are just gonna watch and they're gonna think they're hot and sexy and it's gonna appeal. And it's so lowest common denominator, I find it offensive.
Try watching Ungo, because here's the thing, like in the comparison to that, like we've talked about so much on this show already, but like I don't think I've ever been so offended by a show to have such promising premise and then do absolutely nothing with it, that I look at a show like B&A and just being like, well, they told a story. They had, if anything, their like quote unquote gimmick was, well, it's Studio Trigger animation, so the fights look cool and some of the characters are hot and there's a goofiness to it. And then they did tell a story and information was revealed and characters learned things and maybe, changed their minds about things by the end. And compared to what Ungo was, like, that's not nothing. There is a level of nothing that Is it very like low key? Yes, but it is, D's get degrees is sort of the Trigger motto, and that is like, again, maybe it's just because I just came off Ungo, but that sounds like a breath of fresh air. It was.
I don't think this was the worst thing. Oh, yeah. I think it's, like I said, completely mid tier, and I feel like that's the best I can say about any Trigger show. So. I'll tell you, the biggest thing it has working against it is when it hits those lowest common denominator markers that are going to check boxes, and then we have the main character, and I get it's a trope, I get it's a thing. I also very much hate it because, again, because of certain elements of my past, I'm very proud of several things about who I am and where I come from.
Mm-hmm.
So to have a character, and I get that's why I'm going to tell you, the X-Men Last Stand I'm specifically citing the character of Rogue, of, oh, woe is me, this thing happened. Now I'm arguably an interesting person now by virtue of it being unique. God, it sucks and I hate it. And we start to make progress in how much I'm okay with the way things are. But all of a sudden I find out maybe there is a cure for being a mutant, spoiler. For two things at once. And
Sure.
and at the same time it's like, oh well, then I guess this is the better way to go. Ha 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 ha. Only to then come back around only because, oh, you're the bad guy. Not because, oh, I learned a lesson or I learned to appreciate myself. It's, I learned to appreciate myself after realizing this was all the machinations of a bad man.
Yeah, that's it's been long enough since I've seen the show. I don't remember a lot of specifics, but like now that you're saying this, I'm just like, oh right, it was really uh hollow ringing in a lot of some of the progressions, but like I do also remember the show, like this was not a show that was like purely second screen content for me, but this was definitely just like, oh, I just want to chill out, I just want something that's nice on, and it is great for that, in that way of just like, yeah, don't expect to invest too much, but it's this is a show that you want to hang out with, you know. You might not marry it, but it's a good hangout.
This is a show, if I saw it at a party, I might nod at it and smile or wave, and
Sure.
That's as far as the conversation goes, because I'm not engaging.
It's like, oh man, that guy's in here, he's all right.
They've never caused me a problem in the past.
Yeah.
Or really, it's like, oh, they've got a terrible narrative, but it's mostly their own doing. I'm avoiding them.
Sure.
And that's like I said, these are all the things that detracted from me. Like I said, all the other elements that it's gotten some positivity for, I completely stand by. And like I said, a show like this should exist for the fact it is unique unto itself, even in the way of anime. Yes, there's things like Beastars, but I would argue Beastars is different because it lacks the human element that I would say furries could relate to, or other people could relate to. You know, you transplant the Beastman with anything else, and it, again, like X-Men, you transplant the word mutant with anything else, and it works out pretty well to be a good analog. That's about where it's at. Like I said, it's just the narrative plots, the structure, and again, my very low opinion of Trigger in general.
I was gonna try and bring up the Beastars comparison, because before I watched this show, I would always confuse this show with that show, because they were both very like furry centric Netflix anime. But yeah, like they seem like such different experiences in what they care to be about, and my understanding is Beastar wants to, like, has more of a message to send. But like I said, I would need to really watch it before I had anything to say about it. But I was wondering if you had any other not even comparisons, but just like, is there any other interesting contrast between those two when talking about this show?
Beastars are incredibly horny.
Okay.
And that kind of lost me along the way. This one is not. This wears itself on its sleeve, and I'm sure that from what I've understood, this is the hot take in the comparison of the two. Given an opportunity, I'd rather watch this again, you know, gun to my head, over Beastars, just for the fact that, hey, you know what? Yes, because Beastars, you know, it has a plot. It can be actually kind of engaging, but goddamn, when they get horny, it gets horny, and I just it takes me out of the narrative enough because of the way they kind of shoehorn it in. I get it; these kids are supposed to be teenagers. No. I'm sorry. They're, even for anime, I was like, this seems kind of forced. I would rather watch this again, just for the fact that it's also shorter overall.
Oof. Okay, that's always a pretty strong argument to me.
Well, Beastars has 2 seasons. That's why. I think both first seasons are about the same length in episodes.
Okay.
But it's just, I'd rather do this. Why? At least for all of the issues I will level at any Trigger show and issues narratively with this show in particular, at least it's tackling the message, and I would say a better of being the quote unquote other, of being the not societally decried standard / normal, 2 words I really hate in this kind of context. I say this one kind of does it better because, again, I really like X-Men. X-Men has done this over several decades very well through its various media, and I would say, again, if you just swap out the Beastmen with mutant, you throw some mutant powers in, and I'd say this could be at the very least on par with X-Men Evolution, which is my least favorite of the X-Men animated series, and that's still not a bad show.
All right.
Well, how about you, Joe? Any questions, comments, or concerns?
No, I'm just in an obsessive loop about Ogami Shiro's name.
Yep. I will not apologize for any feelings on quote unquote hot wolf boy. I stand by my statements.
For the listeners, the Japanese word for wolf is read the same way that the words for great deity are read, also known as Okami. So if you're familiar with the game Okami, you're already in on this wordplay.
Yep. There are no secrets in this show. I don't care what anyone tells you.
Well,
This is
circling.
a common tool for Japanese too, because like people's names often have meanings that are relevant to their character. There's a whole thing of like fortune telling and how you name your kid and that culture and stuff.
Mhm.
Circling around, I do believe that brings you to you, Joe. And you got the opportunity for Death Parade.
First of all, I would like to say fuck you, Bob, for giving me a show that is perfectly lasered to me and my interests on about 7 different axes.
I did not pick it for you. You picked it for yourself. And I'm going to spoiler. A super spoiler of the 3. This one was my favorite.
I believe it probably would be mine as well, from what I know of it.
Death Parade is a Japanese anime series created, written, and directed by Yuzuru Tachikawa and produced by Madhouse. Surprisingly, the series, I expected it to be based on a manga, but it was actually based on a short film, which was produced by Madhouse for the Young Animator Training Project's Anime Mirai in 2013. And then this series aired in 2015. The basic premise is that whenever someone dies, they are sent to one of many mysterious bars run by bartenders serving as arbiters inside a tower in the afterlife. There, they must compete in death games with their souls on the line, the results of which reveal what secrets led them to the situation and what their fate will be afterwards, with the arbiters judging if their souls will be sent for reincarnation or banished to the void. And the series has a kind of a character or an audience viewpoint character who is the assistant to Dekim, which is the bartender for the main room that we're paying attention to throughout the series. But we also meet it's a pretty small cast too. I do appreciate too that it's 12 episodes and it's one season telling one story. It gets in, tells its story. And like there are threads to other things going on, but it ends in a way that feels like a good ending.
Okay.
So yeah, basically you get in the beginning of the show, it's mostly episodes of people coming to the bar and being tested. Specifically, it's souls that die at the same time. So 2 people come in at a time, and the arbiters are given kind of an abridged version of their memories. But the trauma of death is such that the souls themselves don't have any memories when they enter the bar, and they kind of remember things as it goes. So we get the setup, and then we learn more about the situation through the episode as they remember things too. And overall, it's one of those shows that's like it's existential in the way that's like it's looking at what it means to be a human, which I always like. And we get a little bit of the story of the Arbiters and their relationships with each other and the system that's in place for all of this, which I also like. I don't know, I'm a sucker for non-humans learning to be human stories. People ask me questions, it's easier for me to explain things
Did you have a
with
favorite
prompts. Dekim, although the manager girl Nona was real good too. I liked her outfit. She had a very good outfit. She has she has suspenders that are like decorative in a way where she kind of like casually sticks her arms through them and like rests them inside them in a really cute way.
Could you explain for Nick and Chuck, because I'm not sure if Nick or Chuck have watched this, how the Arbiters were able to test the humans that came in to show whether they were worthy of a positive or negative afterlife?
Right. The whole point of the way the tests are set up is that it's set up to draw out the darkness in their souls so you can kind of see them at their most. But through the show, you kind of get the sense that this setup isn't really optimal for judging people. And some of the Arbiters are kind of questioning whether this is the right way to do things, especially Dekim, whose assistant is turns out to be a human that he couldn't judge, so she's kind of there. She doesn't have her memories, but she's kind of sort of training to be an arbiter, and that like he's teaching her, which is how like the audience gets wind of like how things work. But her humanity brings a different perspective to a lot of it, and kind of shakes things up.
I guess from my point of view, I meant more, I'll ask the question in this way. Of the different games that they play,
Yeah.
a certain Saw scenario.
Yeah, there's a little bit of would you like to play a game, but it's not. If you are familiar with either the manga or season 0 of Yu-Gi-Oh, you are familiar with Autumn's Soul games, wherein he uses the games to pass judgment on the people he's playing against, usually to punish them for things. It's kind of like that. Like the first game we see is darts, and when they hit a spot on the dartboard, it's connected to a part of the body on the other person, so it causes them pain when it hits. Stuff like that, which again is supposed to like push them to their emotional limits so that their true selves are brought out.
Did you have a favorite episode?
That's a good question. Probably the one near the end where we see the assistant getting her memories back. And just the time spent on her skating was really nice. Other than that, I would say probably the Twister episode.
Yeah, that was going to be my question is, did you have a favorite death game? Because let me tell you, you said death game, and that's all I want to know about.
Yeah, when the people come in, they hit a button, hit a Staples Easy button that sets off a roulette thing to like pick the game that they're playing. There's an arcade one where it's like a fighting game. There's bowling. There's darts. There's air hockey. But yeah, it's just like games.
So it's also kind of like a round one style arcade bar of death games.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
sort of.
okay.
Yeah, when they push the button and it flips, it's like a regular bar, and then there's like a open area off to the side of the bar that like the floor opens and it dramatically, in pure Madhouse animation style, like flips out and like the pieces of the games come out and set up. It's very good.
Is the intro the banger I heard it is?
Oh, yeah, that's my other thing that I liked about this is the music is fantastic and exactly up my alley. I linked the songs in in our notes if you want to go listen to it.
Oh no, I'll be watching this.
Yeah, it's very good. The two things that annoyed me about this show are, one, the art style is Studio Madhouse, so it's animated Madhouse, it's real good, except that everyone's mouths are about 2 inches lower on their face than they should be.
Mm.
I don't know why. It's weird. Um, and the other thing is that each of the title cards, the image behind it is one of the basic Photoshop filters, and I recognized every single one of them, and it just threw me out of it a bit because it's such like a simple effects thing. Other than that, it's great.
Personally, I really like the detective episode where it was a detective and another person.
Yeah, yeah, that was a two-parter.
I
What
like
is-
that the emphasis is game on the death game.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because they're already dead, so it's like, but they don't know that at the beginning, so like he sets it up in a way where he doesn't say it, but it's implied that like, hey, when you play this game, you can leave, and if you lose, I'm gonna kill you.
And I will note, not everyone gets a positive ending. Not everyone gets a negative ending. There's
Yeah.
a chance for double negative or double positive.
Yeah.
Mm.
What's the sort of like vibe focus of the show? Like, is it gritty? Is it sort of tongue in cheek?
It's not gritty, but it's, I don't want to say serious. Like, it's not like,
Dramatic?
yeah, it leans into the drama, I guess, of it. I think it's
Maybe
listed.
melodrama?
It's listed as a psychological thriller, on Wikipedia.
It's not a thriller in my book.
Yeah, but it's definitely like, hey, we're talking about these big topics about like, what it means to be human, what it means to live, and stuff like that. But it's serious in the way that like Monster, I guess, was. But like they still know how to like, do jokes and stuff like. So it's not like Waka Waka jokes, but it's it doesn't take itself seriously.
Maybe the word adult is accurately applied here.
Yeah.
I don't know, the one girl with the other arbiter is kind of annoys me.
Yes.
My eye roll character.
Yes. One of the other arbiters that we see is like in complete contrast to Decim, whose I latched onto, of course, because he's completely flat affect, serious tone. Because it starts off with he's basically like the new arbiter, so he's still like learning the ropes and getting experience with it. And one of the other ones is a hot-headed bartender who runs his bar on like a higher floor, and just kind of picks on him.
Do you think this show would be well served with a season 2?
I could see how you could do a season 2, but you don't need to. I'm also very surprised that it's not based on a manga, because I feel like the manga format would fit it really well. Because you could do a little more exploration into that their business relationship side of it. Because like you definitely get the sense that like I'm a sucker for like angels and demons and like that sort of mythology stuff. So this like afterlife office building that they're all in is super interesting to me, especially because you get the sense that like somebody's hiding things about the truths of things, whether that's the guy at the top or because like the god person who like set this all up apparently is gone. So the guy who's in charge, his eyes are different than the arbiters, so he's something else, but we never like learn explicitly what he is. But he's like the one in charge of everything. But you get the sense that he knows something or is like doing something that he shouldn't be doing with the system or something. So like exploration of that, I would love to learn more about that, but if I could see how a second season wouldn't hold up to the first one, but I could also see how you could do more stories in this like setup.
I was gonna say this is sounding way more like it's a story of the week than a world building thing.
Yes and no.
It's like it's set up in the good way where the stories of the week build the overall story of the people who are there each week doing the job.
That's how you want it to be, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say it's set up a little like The Good Place? I don't know why I'm making that connection.
No, I see.
A little bit in the structure, but since the characters we're sticking with are the ones running the show and the people who are getting judged are like they come in, they do their episode, and then they're gone. It's a little different.
Would it be better if oh my god, I forgot his name again. From Cheers.
Ted Danson?
Yeah, would it should be better if Ted Danson was one of the bartenders?
No. I could see him playing Oculus though, the dude at the top of the chain.
What about the mailman at Norm and his buddy?
I don't know anything about Cheers.
Okay then. Dating myself.
But yeah, I really liked it. More than I intended. Because like it definitely builds as it goes. As like, because you start off and you're like, oh, it's a show of the week kind of thing. But then it builds on the character stuff and you learn more about what's going on and the people and I don't know, it made me cry at the end. So I hate you for that.
Well, that was not my intent, but I am genuinely glad that you enjoyed it.
That sounds like a personal issue.
I just have one more question.
Yeah.
You said that you really resonated with the Flat Affect character.
Yep.
And I just really wanted to know, how did you think Flat Affleck's depiction of Batman was compared to other Batman actors that we've seen over time?
It was a little flat.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I didn't know Flat Stanley grew up to be Batman.
No.
I figured he would grow up to be Flatman. You know, that's... Okay, what do we do now?
But yeah, good show. Small cast of characters too, which really helped. Like it's very focused.
Love it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys noticed, I unintentionally and ironically happened to pick 3 shows that were never picked up for season 2.
I did notice that.
However, I feel like we are good people because you have kind of helped me grow as a person interested in anime, or at least trying to expand my knowledge.
Yay.
I don't want to take credit for that. That feels like it'll be held against me in a court later on.
I will. I can defend it. And I will say in turn, Bob, you gave me the opportunity, like I said, this is not going on my favorites list, but I will say you gave me the opportunity to watch something I would not normally pick for myself. And at least, can say, you know what, I gave it a fair shot.
Yeah, we're expanding our horizons too, watching stuff we wouldn't normally watch.
I can gladly say I don't know that I would watch a BNA again either. Ungo was okay. I agree with you, Nick, that by the end it's a show that was of 2 minds and it really needed to pick one to excel at.
It was of like 6 minds. I don't know what. I don't know.
Yeah. BNA was definitely high schoolers' version of what they think that segregation is.
Yeah,
And
give
it's
me,
like a...
Go back to 1990 and say, okay, high school student, sophomore, junior year, you give me your pitch for what, like, social commentary is on the ideas of segregation, racism, bigotry, and inclusion and isolation look like. Go.
And this is the result. It's not bad. It's just it feels like you are appealing to the wrong audience with the right ideas. But with Death Parade, I really want there to be another season, even though I know there isn't.
Yeah.
I will give you this, Bob. We live in an era where season 2s, season 3s are coming out for very old shows. Reboots are happening, and they're as good, sometimes better. Admittedly, sometimes nowhere near shouldn't have been made. So there's always the opportunity and the chance.
Boy, I hope there's a season 2 in the future for a great many good things.
Hey, I didn't think about this going in, but since you have seen all of these shows before handing them out to us, and so you have opinions on them, does that mean these are all available to go on our mega list of rankings?
Bob did choose to choose them.
At the very least, I feel like definitely the theme songs.
Mhm.
Oh, definitely the theme songs. Because BNA around
Now we got to think about this.
17.
Wow, that's pretty high.
That's pretty high.
Smack dab in the middle.
It's teen bop.
That's exactly why I say it's pretty high.
If it helps Ungo, I'll put it around 25 because it was not memorable to me at all.
Oof.
Maybe because I don't. It's been so long since I watched it, but it did not. Outside of Inga, nothing really stood out to me.
I will say I was actually pretty happy with the intro to Ungo. It had like a I put it in my notes. What did my notes say about it? The guy with a car crash. Nope. Opening slaps, nice up tempo, drum heavy. There was like a nice vocal to it. It's very particular to my musical tastes. But that being said, it wasn't good enough that I watched it every time. It was like I watched it first episode and last episode, and that was it.
However, Death Parade, it's so hard to do. Because of my heart, I can only put it at 2.
Woof, that's a
Yeah, I was gonna
big
say
one. I like
definitely top 5.
I was actually just looking at the top 10. I'm like, what are the top 10 going to look like? Well, that changed that.
Because Joe had put it in here, I would highly recommend you guys listen to it. It's what is it that Nick would say? A bop?
It's so funny too because
going.
Like, yeah, but if you just watched the opening like animation, it does not accurately represent the vibe of the show.
Mm-hmm.
At all. These characters do not have these interactions at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. Even though some of these aren't my choices, and I would put them elsewhere, the top 10 don't look too terrible.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, should we do a rundown of just list the top 10 for the listeners?
Yeah, we should 10 to 1 it.
Okay. Maybe I'll put this on our landing page for the show, but I definitely want to take our season 1 final listings and I'll post them up somewhere. But for those listening along, our top 10 opening song rankings.
All right, in 10th place, we have the Baccano opening, Guns N' Roses, Paradise Lunch. In 9th place, we have the Spy Family opening, which the details are not listed here, so I can't say them. In 8th, we have the Mushishi opening, the Sore Feet song by Ali Kerr.
I believe that's one where it was a little bit, not everyone agreed with me, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. On 7th place, we have Polly Jean, which is the second opening for Carol and Tuesday. In 6th place, we have A Cruel Angel's Thesis by Yoko Takahashi for Neon Genesis Evangelion. In 5th place, we have the banging saxophone score of MD Geist.
I stand by. It's still awesome.
It's
I
awesome.
still call hacks.
That was the 80s. Oh.
It's so 80s. In fourth place, we have Tank for Cowboy Bebop. In third place, we have Through the Night for Outlaw Star.
Yeah.
In second place, we have Flyers by Radio for Death Parade. And the number one song on Bob's list is Ride on a Shooting Star for Fooly Cooly. I think that's a pretty great top 10.
I agree. I would listen to that CD all day long.
I'd still fight on number 5, but other than that, yeah. And
You
I'll still
live through the 80s.
I'll press skip on number 6 just to annoy Nick.
That's mean.
Speaking of annoying Nick, how are we doing on Android waifus for these 3 shows? I think there's one strong contender, which I have not had to offer up in a while.
I didn't have one in mind, so hooray.
Yeah, Death Parade doesn't really have one either.
I actually would argue, Joe, unfortunately,
I know.
because they're all golems.
Yeah.
What?
But it's...
That's not an android.
Yeah, and it's like human souls, so...
Spoiler.
Like...
Oh yeah, spoiler alert.
And it's like they haven't always been golems.
That is true.
So, I don't know. I feel like it doesn't count.
Okay, but do you remember what the AI's actual name? Sorry, the real AI's actual name was?
Starts with an M. That's all I remember.
Murokaze. It was so annoying because in the episodes where it's introduced, it's like their name and their dad's name are like 2 syllables off from each other, but have the exact same structure. I had no idea who anybody was talking about in that episode. But I mean, come on, that character was great. That was one of my favorite characters, and they were full synthetic, baby.
And I will put them right in the middle at 3. Do love them. It was long enough ago that I consider them kind of in the middle. It's like Moto Xena or something like that. I don't know.
Murokaze. I think one was
Motorola.
Motorola.
Yes.
Ungo. Okay. So our Android anime waifu rankings at number 5 is Nia ? From Gurren Lagann. At 4, our Dorothy Wainwright from Big O. 3, the last AI Motorola from Ungo. At 2 is Melfina from Outlaw Star. And number 1 is Ruri from Martian Successor Nadesico. With Android waifu runners-ups of Lane from Lane, Sylvie from The Ancient Magus' Bride, and the IBN 5100 from Steins Gate.
I am so
Checks
impressed
out.
with you right now.
What a list. What, just from remembering where everybody's from?
Yes.
Listen, I have a type.
Lane, I remember from Lane.
I have a type, and they're Android waifus. All right, listen, I'm not gonna. I'll accept that. I'll own up.
All right, so I will have to test your impressive abilities with the anime horses. Going through everyone's thing, the closest we would have to one would be from Chuck's show, and I don't really recall a named horse. I know that there were horse beastmen. I can't remember one having a name.
There was a horse beastman, and boy, did they have an unfortunate time. If there was a name, I sure as hell missed it.
I know that there were gangsters and such, but no one really had names.
We don't talk about Flip and why that name is perfect when you figure out what species they are.
But Nick, go ahead.
No, Ungo absolutely have horses. I have notes about the Ungo horses.
Question: does a
completely
bird qualify
ignored
as a
them.
horse?
A what?
Does a birdman qualify as a horse?
That's horse runner-ups.
Okay.
So in one of the earlier episodes in Ungo, we learned that Yuki is living in essentially bombed out buildings because they have reasons. Might be laziness, might be detective working is not actually a really good source of income. But it is a no vehicles zone because government is cracking down on everything, and I guess because of danger, road collapses and whatnot. So Rie, here to pick up Yuki, shows up to the guards in the front of the sector riding on a horse with a spare horse, and it's just like, hey, I heard this was a no vehicle zone. Horses ain't vehicles, right? And then she waltzes on through. But then for some reason that kind of becomes a running gag that, like, whenever she is traveling on her own, she takes a horse instead of a car.
You wouldn't gas a horse.
Listen, you can lead a horse to gasoline, but I wouldn't make him drink. And then so actually my note was that there's another episode where we start with Yuki on a job to try and reconnect a phone for a prostitute client of his. She is the prostitute. He is not offering to prostitute services. But then Rie once again shows up with her equine companion, and I'm like, oh, they both rode in with horses. WHOR.
Boo.
Hey, the joke came back.
Thank you. I finally got to it. I can rest easy now.
You got my approval, buddy.
But yeah, Rie's horses are absolutely horses. They have a whole plot beat to explain them. That was completely unnecessary.
All right, I will give you that Rie's horses are horses. They can go happily down in 10, where their forgettable selves will live.
But they're not cars. They are notable because they are not vehicles. That is all
true.
I can give them. Yeah, Rie's horses, brackets, which are notably not vehicles
And strictly just horses. Honestly, on this list, which one outside of really Onyx, the most bestest of horses,
Fact.
is truly horsey horses.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
Psyche is a horse.
I was going to
say. So is
say.
Kokuo, but he is a magical horse.
Chuck,
Psyche's not a magical horse.
Would you like to do the honors of giving our full horse rankings since Joe took one and I took one?
I feel like the correct answer is nay, but sure. So we have Rie's horses, which are notably not vehicles at number 10. At number 9, we have Posture King from, help me out, Nick. The name just left my mind.
That was Shin Getarobo versus Nier Getarobo. That was Texas Max's horse.
I was about ready to say it, and then the name Diebuster just popped right in and completely erased it.
Ooh,
number 8, the True King, Funsaki from G Gundam. 7, Tuesday's Suitcase, which probably has like a maybe 8 horsepower from Carol and Tuesday. We have Haruka's Vespa from Fooly Cooly, which has about maybe 10 horsepower. We have Bond, but not James Bond, the goodest of Boyd's, a dog from Spy Family. We have the Count of Monte Cristo's quote-unquote badass metal horses. Horsepower to be determined at a later date. And we have, entering number 3, the entire anime of Uma Musume Pretty Derby. And number 2, we have Kukuo from Nick. Help me out.
That's Hokuto. What?
Oh, I don't. Kokuo had his own series.
Yeah, Kokuo had her own series, which was a spin-off. But Fistmo Star, yeah.
And then at number 1, the Usurper King Onyx at 18 horsepower.
That horse could operate an elevator.
Funsaki operated a Gundam.
But Funsake had training.
Onyx, don't know that. Onyx would have had to have training.
Nope, Onyx was born with that superior intellect.
That is provably untrue.
Don't forget about our horse runner-ups. Runners up? Runners up.
Well, okay, I have to add something to the runners up because if we're including non-horse things, a character by the name of Pingua, a beast man, who totally is just normal fly guy, not absolutely a beastman rights activist, former soldier turned guy on the defense for the right cause.
He drops bombs.
He did not drop bombs. That was the other guy. That was the assassin whose name eludes me and was only there for an episode, not even a full episode. But yeah, Pingua is, because he is essentially a taxi service after his introduction episode.
He-Man has to have that flying sidekick.
But yeah, read out those runner-ups for us.
All right, so we have horse runner-ups starting at the bottom, since we don't have enough to really make a top 10. We have Pingua, because, MD Geist's giant cannon motorcycle checks out. The fangirl horses, which I'm assuming were Uma Musume.
Those were the ones that we always saw sitting in line at the races.
Right. Yes, I do remember those. I'd watch that show. We have Alpaca Man a la Steins Gate. We have Moomin Rider's bike.
Yes.
We have the Tachikomas from Ghost in the Shell. And then, because he is also a ship, Gilliam 2 from the Outlaw Star of the series Outlaw Star.
Hey, do things need to be reconsidered? Is the Outlaw Star, how Flying Pussyfoot is the Outlaw Star?
It can be two things.
Okay. But yeah, that brings us to, did any of these shows have Flying Pussyfoots from today?
No, in my case.
No.
I don't really think so.
There was, okay, in Ungo, there was the quote-unquote trolley on the movie set, which a lot of people said didn't move, but a couple people said it totally moved and ran that guy over. But also, the whole movie set was completely an illusion. This is not a spoiler, so I don't know how anyone would want to count that. Although it did move one time. There was a flashback, theoretical flashback inside of the hallucination where we saw it appear, run the guy over, and then disappear.
I was never here.
That show was weird. Maybe it was alright. It had moments. That guy arrested that fridge once. I suppose doesn't have to go on the list.
I don't even remember what crashed satellite was on.
That
Just
was
number 9.
Steins Gate.
That was Steins Gate. I was going to say, Bob, I believe this is your list to read now as the...
Number 8 would be the train Lane rides to school that maybe hit that girl in a dream on Lane. I don't think we'll ever know if that was a dream sequence or not. There's the Goat Train Car number 7 from Carol and Tuesday. At number 6, the Rainbow Mushi... Bleh!
Bleh.
At number 6, that Rainbow Mushi from Mushishi. Number 5, the Count of Monte Cristo's Badass Metal Carriage.
Which, of
from
course,
the Count of Monte Cristo
is in a pair with the Badass Metal Horses.
Yeah, they work out. They're bestest of friends. One couldn't move without the other. Although that's not entirely true. I'm sure the horses could move without the carriage. At number 4, we have the Capital Tank of the Noah Guard from MD Geist. At number 3, we have Rider's Chariot from Fate Zero, I believe. Number 2, very nicely, the Evangelions from Evangelion.
I think you'll find that it's pronounced Evangelions.
Yep, I was going to make the same joke, thank you.
You're welcome.
They are best friends with the Thundercats. And then at number 1, we have the original Flying Pussyfoot from Bakano.
You could call it the titular Flying Pussyfoot.
Because there can be only one, except we have 9.
We have pretty good lists. I'm so happy with the list that we've assembled.
I agree.
All right, well, that's gonna do it for our lists, and in a sense, that's gonna do it for doing it. Yeah, who would like to talk a little bit about the future, since we are calling this sort of the official end of Season 1 of Deep into Weebs?
So we have now come to the end of our Season 1 mega list, and we want to thank everyone for having joined us on this wonderful journey. We definitely have plans in store for Season 2. Please stay tuned. At this time, we're going to take some time to recoup, refresh, come back with some new series, and reflect on the experience along the way, and ensure that we bring the same, if not better quality to you going to the future. And with that, again, thank you so much for being with us on this journey. For the time being, we're going to just sign off with I've been Chuck.
I've been Bob, and I can't wait to learn some more.
I've been Nick, and I still only recommend watching anime on a rare occasion.
And I'm Joe.
We'll see you all soon.
Thanks for hanging out.
See ya, Space Cowboy.
Later.
Amine.
Deep in the Weebs is a show by Chuck, Nick, Joe, and Bob. Our theme music is Kawaii Friends by C. 3. You can find our show on YouTube, or subscribe to the audio-only version on iTunes or wherever podcasts are served.
I'm just trying to think, is there any sort of supercut I should make for the outro? And
no.
some kind of every time they.
Mm,
I don't know.
Yeah, I can't think of any. I don't think we have every time, in fact.
Yeah.